We were still on the trail for Forrest Fenn's treasure, but we were deep in grizzly bear country. If our theory was right, the creek that would lead us to the treasure location would be just up ahead. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Part 1 left off at Tom Minor Creek Road and the line in the poem that reads, "The end is ever drawing nigh." Our interpretation of this was to take the road all the way to the end, since the Tom Minor Creek Road was a dead end that leads you towards Ram's Horn Peak Mountain, and what's known as a draw, a type of terrain formed by ridges with low ground between them. Forrest always said a solid knowledge of geography would be helpful, which would include knowing the features of a terrain, such as a draw. Since Forrest was ex-military, he would definitely be familiar with this term, and it perfectly described the type of terrain we were entering. Draws are caused by flash floods, but despite being created by water flow, they are typically dry and full of loose rocks from eroded rockfall. This fits exactly with the next line in the poem that talks about a creek you can't paddle up that has heavy loads and water high. Tom Minor Campground was our final driving destination. From there, we'd be going on foot. Through our research, we'd been able to take a huge area covering 4 states and narrow down our search to just one specific trail. The trail begins where the Tom Minor Creek Road ends. There is a small dirt pullout at the head of the trail, and when we arrived, there was only one car parked there. From here, the trail takes you into the Gallatin National Forest. Forrest repeatedly said that all you needed to find the treasure was the poem and a good map. Finding the right map was key, and only one map is mentioned in the entire book. One of the chapters talks about Forrest and his friend Donnie's trip into the mountains, and it mentions they took a map of the Gallatin National Forest that would really come in handy later on. We felt like he was pointing readers towards this specific map, but the Gallatin National Forest is huge. We needed to narrow it down further. That's when we came across the petrified forest that exists on Ram's Horn Peak Mountain. Suddenly, we remembered a line in the poem that says, "If you are brave and in the wood, I give you title to the gold." Initially, this line didn't make sense to us because Forrest had said the treasure was not located anywhere dangerous. So why did you have to be brave? Maybe it was a play on words. Forrest is said to think like a kid. If you tell a kid about a petrified forest, they might picture a pretty scary place. He also said to use your imagination. If you imagine there's something in the petrified forest that's made those trees petrified, then you would have to be pretty brave to enter yourself. There was a marked trail that would take you right into the petrified forest, and the creek named Dry Creek ran right through the forest. The trail starts at Tom Minor Campground and leads you through National Forest land. From here, we'd be entering grizzly territory. Yellow and purple flowers grow in the fields that surround the trail, and with no other hikers around, the only sounds we heard were the gentle streams that ran through the meadows. The plan was to follow the petrified forest trail until we got close to the Dry Creek, then leave the trail and follow the creek from there. Soon we started seeing actual signs for treasure, real signs talking about treasures, referring to all the quartz and amethysts in the area. The rocks around here literally glistened with crystals. We figured this is what Forrest was referring to in his poem, when he says, "Hint of riches new and old," new riches being the treasure chest and old riches referring to the natural rock crystals. Further up the trail, we started noticing the heavy loads, the huge rock boulders that had been dumped there by the flood, or water high, as Forrest puts it. We followed the boulders, which led us to Dry Creek. We were hoping that one of these boulders would stand out as being the blaze. We tried to follow the route of Dry Creek, but there were so many fallen trees that were making progress difficult. We found an animal trail that was going to the same direction as the creek, and we started up that, keeping our eyes on the heavy boulders. At one point in the trail, we were passing through a densely wooded area where we would have to turn a blind corner that opened up to a small alpine meadow. And that's when we saw it. A mother grizzly bear with 2 young cubs grazing in the meadow. She hadn't seen us yet, but she could definitely smell us. We didn't want to have to use the bear spray, so we slowly backed away and headed back down the trail and away from the bears. The bears headed upstream, which was where we needed to go. We checked our trail app to see if there was another way around, but it was getting late and we knew the bears would be more active around dusk, so we decided to head back to camp. We didn't feel like camping with the bears, and since Tom Minor campsite was deserted, we drove back to a campground in Yankee Jim Canyon. We spent the night trying local beers and coming up with a new plan to locate the blaze. The day was a write-off as far as the search was concerned, but we would try again tomorrow. This time, we didn't want to be aimlessly wandering through bear territory, looking for a blaze that could be anything. As we sat around the fire, we did some more research about the blaze and what it might be. Forrest had been pretty vague whenever talking about the blaze, saying it could be a marking on a tree or even a stripe on a horse's head, and that there are a million blazes out there. He also said his blaze would last at least 1,000 years, which would rule out almost all trees. So we started thinking about rock markings and discovered you can also have a blaze of quartz, or a quartz vein, as they are often referred to. And these were not just exclusive to rocks, but existed in the stumps of petrified trees too, which last millions of years. We felt that the poem had already led us toward Gallatin petrified forest, so we started researching to see if there was one particular tree that might stand out from the rest, and then we found this. What claimed to be the world's tallest upright petrified tree, and it was located on the same mountain we were already searching. The article said it was not visible from any trail, so despite being a huge 34 feet tall tree, it could be easily missed unless you knew where to look. It's believed to have been deposited there by a flood millions of years ago, alongside some of the massive boulders that have been seen earlier in the day. It's also possible to climb inside an opening just behind the tree. This gave a whole new meaning to brave and in the wood, and it seemed like the perfect place to stash a treasure chest. When Forrest was asked what the blaze was, he answered, "Anything that stands out," and this petrified tree clearly stood out. It was literally standing upright and coming out of the rock. Suddenly we had our blaze, a blaze that had stood in place for 50 million years, and something that was sure to last 1,000 more. It was definitely impressive, and something that anyone would be pretty amazed to discover. The poem talks about something that would evoke a marvel gaze, and this was our marvel. The strange part was there seemed to be absolutely no reference to this petrified tree anywhere outside this article. Not even the forest rangers who maintain the area it's located in had seen or heard of it, so barely anyone knew about it. We know from Forrest's book that he and his friend Donnie took a trip in the mountains when they wanted to retrace the steps of early explorers. We knew they traveled north from West Yellowstone because they passed through Red Canyon, and by the time they got lost, Forrest says they were 50 miles from home. If they'd kept heading north, they would have passed right through the area of Ramshorn Peak. And it sounds like they did, since Forrest said they knew the way back was to head south. He also says it involved heading over the highest mountain he'd ever seen, and at a little over 10,200 feet, Ramshorn Peak is one of the tallest mountains in the area. There's also a second story that Forrest talks about in an interview, where he says that he and a friend walked the 91 miles from West Yellowstone to Bozeman, but avoided roads along the way. If they'd tried to walk a straight shot, or as the crow flies, they would have also passed right by Ramshorn Peak. Forrest describes this as one of the best trips of his life. We woke up early the next day and started scoping out a map for areas of Dry Creek, where we might find the rocky outcropping with the tall petrified tree. It was said to be located on the lower slopes of the mountain, which should mean we wouldn't have to go too far off trail, and hopefully the terrain wouldn't be too steep. From the few photos we had, we knew there was an amazing view of the mountains from the petrified tree, and we were able to line up the ridges of the distant mountains with our own photos from the previous day to get a rough idea of direction and elevation. We headed back to Ramshorn Peak and started heading towards Dry Creek for the second time. We checked the map to see if there was another trail that would get us closer to the other side of Dry Creek. And there was, the Buffalo Horn Pass Trail. We left the trail when it intersected with Dry Creek and started heading uphill to get a better view. We couldn't have been more than 200 feet above the trail, but it felt like we had the whole valley to ourselves. It was amazing how peaceful it was. This seemed like a special place and somewhere that would be special to Forrest too. Everything seemed to be lining up and we felt like we were close.
If I was standing where the treasure chest is, I'd see trees, I'd see mountains, I'd see animals, I'd smell wonderful smells of pine needles or pinon nuts, sagebrush, and I know the treasure chest is wet.